All right, my good friends, this is Mr. Davis. This is the last review video I have. Today I'm just going to wrap it up with these two units here and try to do it in less than 10 minutes here. So Unit 5, Revolutions, and Unit 6, the Age of Imperialism, and they both go hand in hand with one another. The first thing in Unit 5 they talk about is the Enlightenment. And if you get a question about the Enlightenment, I'm going to guess that they'll have definitely a source in there, like from a woman, like Mary Wollstonecraft, who was talking about, the challenges that women weren't getting educated like men, or in France, Olympia de Georges writes the Declaration of Rights of the Female Citizen, which is the same thing as what was previously the Declaration of Rights of Man or of Citizen in France. And she was actually beheaded. So if there's an Enlightenment DBQ, like explain the impact of the Enlightenment or evaluate the extent of the Enlightenment, change the world, etc. So the thing about the Enlightenment is it inspired revolutions. There's definitely a feminist movement within the Enlightenment movement. They might talk about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, etc., in the Seneca Falls Conference, and also there is. Apologize. Okay, so there's two more women. So I think it's going to be a like feminist and abolitionist. And then you might even get something in there from like Thomas Jefferson or something. So the Enlightenment was challenging conservative governments. Conservative means you like things to stay the same, and their monarchies from almost any powerful country in Europe is a monarchy. So I think the Enlightenment could have a lot of different writings. The big thing is that it caused revolutions to challenge why the kings are telling everyone that they've gotten their power from God and they have nobody else to answer to. Then the actual war revolutions, American Revolution. So I would think like comparing and contrasting the different revolutions could be a possible essay. I don't think specifically the American Revolution is not going to be like the DBQ question. Maybe on a U.S. history exam, but not on a world history exam. But you comparing and contrasting the two revolutions. One thing I realized here is that the French Revolution generally was not successful. There's tons of outside evidence. And they were fighting a king in their own country, whereas the Americans, the Haitians, the Latin American Spanish wars, revolutions, they were going up against a country that's a whole ocean away. And I think that aided everyone. France was going up against the king, and they felt like they needed to be so violent to break out of the chains and storm the Bastille, and then make sure people are still fighting for the cause. And France was very bloody. They're all bloody revolutions, but France is probably the bloodiest. So I could see it comparing and contrasting. They're all different and they all have similarities. So you could make an argument that probably America was the most successful one, and they were built on the Enlightenment. Thomas Jefferson was an intellectual. So there's different facts about the different ones. Simon Bolivar, and that was Creoles who were fighting against the Spanish monarchy, etc. But I think if you're gonna to tie the two together, I think if you got a DBQ, it would be similar to ones we've written about already, where the Industrial Revolution and expires the age of imperialism. So there's tons of facts in here about the Industrial Revolution. Starts with England and their close proximity to water and having coal all over the place. You go from a cottage industry to a factory system. Jethro Tull created the siege drill in 1700, caused a population explosion, and it also requires less of a need for farmers, so urbanization occurs. So often said this thing is filled with context and is filled with outside evidence. So, tons of things in here about the Industrial Revolution that can like tell you the story of what's going on. So, the Industrial Revolution, it inspires, so to speak, the age of imperialism, is because England is just a small country. So they need to go all the way across their empire to get things, to get cotton from England, to get cotton from the United States, to bring maybe it's lumber, etc., diamonds and other different metals that can be brought from their colonies back to their shores. Another thing about the age of imperialism is that now we're going to see the slave trade end. The slave trade is going to end in 1808 here. So now there's a need for workers. So they're going to make different kinds of workers. You're going to have indentured servants, and those are people that they owed a debt. They were debtors who were working off a debt. In some places, like the Indians and the Chinese, like people from India and China, were going all over the world to different places because they had such big populations, but they hadn't industrialized yet, so they're going all over the world. So I could see they could be comparing nations that which embraced industrialism against a nation that did not, like China. But for the most part, the powerful countries of Europe do get industrialized. The sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire, they had fallen on hard times, but they're still trying to hang on. But one of the biggest success stories, which we are living in it right now, is the United States of America. And they're like, if you were comparing and contrasting England to the United States, you could say they had the same economic principles, but the United States had so much more land. The age of imperialism, it was the Monroe Doctrine, and I'm drawing a blank here, but that they were going to go for the manifest destiny is what I want to say. So manifest destiny said that the Americans, basically it was their destiny to go from sea to shining sea. So America is very successful in the Industrial Revolution because they have so much resources and they have a big population. Slavery takes a while to end in the United States. 1865 is when the Civil War comes to an end. But the United States becomes a big player, world player in the 1800s thanks to industrialization. A lot of the things that are happening in England happen in the United States as well, except for the United States it's a much bigger country, and it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger. Population is going to explode. Industrialization, a cause and effect of industrialization, is a growing population because you're going to see goods being made more efficiently. Although people are living in crowded, dirty, unsanitary conditions in some factory towns, eventually the living conditions will improve. There's two different revolutions. The first one is kind of your basic kind of mechanical powered goods, and then the second one's like your big ones, like the railroad and electricity, gasoline, etc. So I tried to put something in here about the two different ones. Also wanted to talk about the countries that either refused to or it was mandated that they had to. China is when we started a course with the Song Empire and the Song Scroll and the Song Dynasty. China was the number one power in the world, like undisputed. It was beast mode over in China. But now they had become isolationists. They worried more about, I guess, like the fact that they got conquered by the Mongols always kind of gotten them worried about their northern borders. And they kind of focused on security, conquering their own land territory because they were a land-based empire. But they didn't focus on industrializing. And they clearly get left behind by the Europeans in this point, and so much so that the proud Chinese get very angry when their country gets hooked on opium, You're going to see a Taiping rebellion take place during the Age of Imperialism, where the people of China are trying to overthrow the Qing dynasty. And actually, the Europeans, the British, help the Qing stay in power because the Europeans was beneficial for them to have like kind of a weak dynasty in charge, because that would mean that they could do whatever they want. There's also some opium wars where it was really clear that the British could just tear apart the Chinese military. Like they were using like cannons. Wow. The Chinese were still fighting with swords in some instances. And then a country that was they decided to get industrialized was Japan. And Matthew Perry goes to Japan in 1853 and tells them to open up their trade routes. One thing. Now the white man's burden could come in there to play as well. And if they try to westernize, like if you hear like the white man's burden where they feel like they got to go in and give them an education, etc., that is just like they're not doing it. Like the white Europeans are not doing westernizing people for their own good. They just think that they're barbarics, and that they're just civilizing them because they ignore the other people's culture. So some good facts in here, and I will stop this one here. Eventually.